This is Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
I'm the only lawyer ever to obtain a court ruling that a president of the United States committed a crime.
For truth. For competition.
As a young lawyer, I helped break up AT&T. That's why you have all your cell phones today.
For sovereignty. For the Republic.
I'm the guy who, at Judicial Watch, which I founded, uncovered the Chinagate scandal. Millions of dollars going to the Clinton campaign, corrupting our political system.
For the privacy of citizens.
And I'm the only guy to have enjoined the National Security Agency from mass surveillance on hundreds of millions of Americans.
Tearing it up.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
Bringing it back.
We're going to take this country apart and put it back together again in the way envisioned by our founding fathers.
It's not just talk.
We're not just regurgitating news stories. Larry Klayman, special prosecutor, is making the news.
And now, here's Larry.
Welcome to this edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. We have a great show, and there are a lot of things that are happening. As we say in the lead-in, we just don't report the news, we make the news. But here's the news that's coming out today, and let me tell you what I'm going to do about it. We have a situation here where we've now learned in the last week that former FBI Director James Comey said that General Michael Flynn, did not lie when he was interviewed by special agents of the FBI. Yet, Robert Mueller, that very corrupt special counsel who wanted to squeeze General Flynn to get him to say something that would incriminate President Trump, because we know that Mueller's real intentions are to take Trump out, either through indictment or an impeachment report to Congress, should the Democrats take control of the House of Representatives next fall. This fall, actually, they will impeach the president. It'll then go to the Senate for a conviction trial. I don't know whether they'll succeed there or not, but you never know. But Mueller has evil intentions. Mueller is an evil man. He's not a man of integrity. We know that at this point. And the establishment in Washington of both political parties are promoting him. They're saying that he is someone that should be respected. You even have Trey Gowdy, the Republican, who talks a good game, but under the surface, he plays both sides of the street. He's the head of the Government Oversight and Reform Committee, and he's praising Mueller. But the fact that Flynn did not lie to the FBI, but they indicted him anyway, Mueller, trying to flip him. And thus far, they don't seem to have gotten much out of Flynn, because I believe that he is a man of integrity, tells you the true intentions. Now, we know that the judge that the Flynn case was assigned to, the criminal prosecution judge Emmett Sullivan, he's a Democrat. He's a Clinton appointee. Previously, he had been appointed by Elder Bush to the court of the Superior Court of District of Columbia. He was then, in effect, promoted to the federal court. He's one of the few Democrats on this bench in Washington, D.C., the federal bench, that has any sense of integrity. The rest of them almost have none. And Sullivan is demanding that all exculpatory information, that which may serve to defend Flynn, to show that he wasn't guilty of anything, be turned over by Mueller. I commend him for that. And this is something that, in fact, the judge in the Bundy case, we've talked about that, should have done a lot sooner, before all of it came out during a trial, because we know that the Bundy case, that indictment there, was dismissed for withholding exculpatory information. Federal prosecutors did that. But this is the state of the Mueller investigations. Now, if that's not enough, see, Mueller sees his case against Flynn crumbling. So today he's accepting a plea from the partner of Manafort, Paul Manafort, Rick Gates. And he's going to try to flip Gates now and try to get him to testify against Trump and the people in and around Trump. This is his second bite of the apple here. Manafort, of course, is holding firm. Now, that case has been assigned to a judge, Amy Berman Jackson, who is a political hack. She was appointed by Obama. We've talked about her before on other shows. And she has kind of presided over this case in a way that she's really perverted justice. Manafort, for instance, is still under house arrest, and so is Gates. She put a gag order on them that they can't even talk publicly about the case while they're getting the crap beaten out of them by MSNBC and CNN. That's unconstitutional. And now a plea is going to be presented to her, likely last Friday, which is something that's going to really affect this case potentially, because Gates may, in fact, not just turn state's evidence against Manafort, but he may be forced to say something that will incriminate Trump, however inaccurate it may be. But people, drowning people do desperate things. And if they have to lie to get themselves off the hook or to get a lighter sentence at sentencing, they'll do it sometimes. In fact, they'll frequently do it. So this is the risk. And then we find out last Friday as well that Manafort has just indicted 13 Russians who supposedly interfered in our elections with social media and everything else. Now, we know that the country of Russia, by the way, my grandparents came from the Ukraine. They were confused. They thought they came from Russia in the earlier part of the 20th century. But Russia is not the most honest place, to put it mildly. And by Mueller indicting 13 Russians from Russia, some of whom, are in this country or can be extradited back to this country, these Russians will not hesitate to lie. And undoubtedly what his intention is to get more information to use against Trump, to either indict Trump or to send an impeachment report to Congress, which is very incriminating. And this points out why you need to go to freedomwatchusa.org. freedomwatchusa.org. Sign the petition to have me appointed special counsel. We have about 15,000 signatures so far. Read some of the comments. And I have to say this, because if I don't say it, I won't be doing any justice to myself or to the country. There's no other lawyer in this country that will risk all for this country. We know that Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, won't risk anything. I mean, he's become an inert zero at the Justice Department because he himself is under investigation by Mueller for alleged Russian collusion, lying to Congress, and obstructing justice in the firing of Comey. I will go the distance for you. I would have the powers of the Justice Department if I was special counsel. We need many more than 15,000 signatures. And sign up and give us your contact information so we can keep you up to date of what we're doing at Freedom Watch. We're going to need 100,000 signatures to get President Trump to order the Justice Department, which is now being controlled by Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, who's overseeing the Mueller investigation. And, of course, he's conflicted. He's an Obama holdover. He doesn't want to do anything. His neck's been put on the line for doing improper things with regard to the wiretaps of the Trump Tower and everything else. So we need to force my appointment because no one else will take Mueller out. The guy's committed crimes. The guy has been leaking grand jury information. None of these Clinton and Obama hack judges are willing to deal with that on the federal court in Washington, D.C. The appellate court, they all have lunch together in the lunchroom. They're not going to do anything either. They're all buddies with each other. They protect each other. That's why I started Judicial Watch back in 1994, and it's why I now run Freedom Watch, which I also founded, because these judges, it's a club. They protect each other. They circle the wagons. And if I have the authority of the full powers of the Justice Department to commence a grand jury, to hold Mueller accountable, to hold the Clintons accountable, to hold Obama accountable, to hold George Soros, Black Lives Matter, Louis Farrakhan, radical feminists that are trying to destroy people with false information, that, there are valid cases of men who have abused women, but everything now is coming out to try to destroy men who, frankly, can't defend themselves in court. There's no due process. You name it. And this country is out of control. So I need to be able to be named special counsel to not only investigate Mueller and to hold him accountable and to legally take him out, but also to finally get justice for the Clintons, against the Clintons, rather, Obama, Eric Holder, the whole lot of the leftist criminals that have destroyed our justice system and are trying to destroy the Trump presidency. Because if President Trump is knocked out of office, you will wish that you had Obama back as president. The next president's going to be much worse. As bad as Obama was, he was the worst president of my lifetime, believe me. But this is a situation now which is dire and which we need to get justice here, not just to have an equal justice system, but a system that does not take out our current president. He deserves an opportunity to do his job. On the horizon are nuclear threats, more than threats, the possibility of nuclear annihilation from North Korea, from Iran. We know what's happening this week with Israel. Iran's got a foothold in Syria and in Lebanon. We could have a war in the Middle East. We don't need Robert Mueller trying to take down the one president that we have that's willing to stand up for American values, American courage, and frankly for the rest of our allies, such as Israel. So go to freedomwatchusa.org, freedomwatchusa.org. Sign the petition to have me named special counsel. We have 15,000 names now. We need 100,000 names or more. And give us your contact information, because we need to enlist you as part of our citizens' army. We don't have any choice. We have to stand up for ourselves. We don't want a violent revolution. The country can't afford that. We need to use our legal system. And the only way that legal system is going to be able to be used properly is that if Larry Klayman is special counsel, because there's nobody else out there that has the guts to do it. My former group, Judicial Watch, they get documents, but then they ask the government to bring about justice. The government is not going to bring about justice. We're going to need a special counsel. The head of Judicial Watch today is not a lawyer. That's why they just get documents mostly. I am a lawyer. I know how to do this. I can get the job done. So go to freedomwatchusa.org. This is not just an advertisement. This is a crisis. I need to be special counsel, and you need to put your name out there to say, point Larry Klayman special counsel. The president needs to instruct Rod Rosenstein to do that, and it needs to be done now, because we're now at critical mass. So again, go to freedomwatchusa.org. This is a crisis. I'm sending out the clarion call. My name is not Paul Revere. My name's Larry Klayman, and I will get the job done for you. I will pledge anything that I have, and my honor and my life, to restore this nation. That's how much I believe in it, and you know that I have the guts to do it. So go to freedomwatchusa.org, sign that petition. Let us make it clear to the president to instruct Rosenstein to name me as special counsel before it's too late. I want to thank you. God bless you. We'll be right back with our next segment of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman.
Dangerous.
You don't care, use the court and the law.
Lethal.
This is bad.
Special Prosecutor
Very bad.
Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
We're back with my very good friend and colleague, former Congressman Bob Barr, former U.S. Attorney from the Northern District of Georgia in Atlanta. You know, I went to law school at Emory. We have some common friends down there. But Bob is someone who has the utmost integrity. He's got the courage of his convictions. And during the Clinton years, we worked together. Of course, he was the one that submitted articles of impeachment. And interestingly enough, he did so as my first child was being born. He was on TV. I kind of got distracted a little bit. You were on CNN at the time. It wasn't the Communist News Network in those days. It was just left of center. It wasn't far left. But anyway, here's Bob. And I always bring him on the show because I want to get his perspective on things. And we work together on other things about what's been going on. And of course, during the first segment of this show today, we talked about Mueller really trying to tighten the so-called noose around the neck of President Trump, whether it's with regard to General Flynn, whether it's regard to Paul Manafort and his partner Rick Gates, whether it's regard to indicting just last Friday 13 Russians who were accused of trying to meddle in last fall's elections, the elections which gave rise to the election of Donald Trump. They were indicted today. And, of course, Russians will probably say anything to get out of, going to jail for the rest of their lives. So Mueller is out there for blood. And, Bob, you didn't hear it, but I've suggested, because we have a petition on our website at freedomwatchusa.org, that people go to that website, sign the petition. I have volunteered to be special counsel. I think you know me. I would get the job done. And it's not just the Clintons and Obama and everybody else that needs to be investigated for Fusion GPS or Uranium One, but it's Mueller himself, because he's been leaking grand jury information and doing things which I consider to be warranted an investigation of criminal activity. But I want to get your take on Mueller, where you think he's going. What do you think his motivations are? I know the company line in Washington, D.C. is a man of integrity. I don't think he's a man of integrity. My clients have had experiences with him. I've had experiences with him. But give us your take on this, Bob, because with your prior experience, I want the listeners to hear it.
Thank you, Larry. As I wrote in the book that I did following my service in the Congress, in which I talked about the Clinton impeachment, the title of the book was The Meaning of Is. I recounted a incident with Bob Mueller. It was during the Waco hearings, as you recall, in early 1995, and on the morning of one of the days in which we were going to be questioning FBI officials about their performance and behavior at Waco, I get a call right before we went into session, and it was from Bob Mueller. And as I recount in my book, he said essentially to me, Bob, we both worked with these guys at the FBI. You know them. They're good guys. Go easy on them, would you? To me, that tells me an awful lot about the man. And when Bob Mueller is given the extremely broad mandate of the special counsel here, as he's been given, and essentially an unlimited budget and an ability to go wherever he wants, what he's going to be doing is looking for skins to hang on his wall, not just to put in his pistol, so to speak. I wrote an article shortly after his appointment last year in which I said it's essentially like the old tale about, I forget the Beria, the NKVD or predecessor to the KGB official that told Stalin, bring me the man and I'll show you the crime. Bob Mueller will get indictments. It's fairly easy when you're in his position, when you have such broad authority. And as you indicated also, with vacuuming up and indicting a bunch of Russians, it's fairly easy, and I wouldn't put a better ruple on what these guys say, but it's just more of sort of the same stuff, chasing potential targets with his broad mandate until he is able to get some indictments, and we'll probably see more, but nothing that he's done so far, as I've seen, Larry, comes even remotely close to what his described mandate was supposed to be, and that is to find.
Be right back. We're at the end of the segment. We'll be right back with more of Bob Barr.
And now, 4 words that make corrupt politicians make wee-wee in their little pants.
Transparency and the rule of law will be the touchstones of this presidency.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
Be the one who makes our country great again. Go to freedomwatchusa.org and donate.
We're back with Bob Barr. Pick it up where you left off, Bob, because this is important, and I'll weigh in after you finish.
It's relatively easy to identify some foreign individuals, Russians in this case, supposedly involved in meddling or money laundering. I doubt that there's too many citizens of Russia these days in the post-communist era who haven't laundered money for one extent or another, or for somebody else. It's just sort of the way business is done in the old Soviet Union, the new Russia. I think it's also important to keep in mind that there almost certainly are individuals from all manner of countries that try for one reason or another to influence the elections in our country. I mean, we live in a relatively free country. We have these mediums, these social mediums, and it's fairly easy to go to one of the networks and tell them some story about trying to influence the election and running a poll and so forth. It's very easy to do, but that's not collusion. That's not a conspiracy from the standpoint that we would think of it normally, or that I think was really contemplated by the initial appointment of Mueller.
Well, you're right, Bob, but he's a desperate man right now. I mean, he's struck out so far in various things. I mean, he's indicting people that are not within the scope of his mandate that was given to him by this Obama holdover, Rod Rosenstein, who was the deputy attorney general. He went way beyond that with Manafort and Gates. Apparently, he's not getting anything out of Manafort, so now he's trying to plead out Gates. With regard to Flynn, we find out just in the last week that former discredited FBI director James Comey actually testified to Congress that Flynn didn't lie when he was interviewed by FBI special agents. Yet Mueller went ahead and indicted him anyway, and he's in deep trouble there. I'll tell you something. I think Mueller himself should be indicted for the criminal leaks that come out of his grand jury almost on a daily basis. He's got these Obama, Clinton sycophants, yes men, as his prosecutors. They'll do anything to try to destroy the president and the people around the president. One of them, Andrew Weissman, has done things that are completely unethical in the past and had convictions thrown out by higher courts because he wanted the scalp of these people. And we remember, of course, the book and the film Bonfires of the Vanities. These prosecutors will go out to make a name for themselves because they're basically political. You weren't when you were U.S. Attorney from the Northern District of Georgia. You played it straight, but a lot of them don't play it straight, and they want to make a name for themselves, and that's this guy Wiseman. And then you've got, a situation here where Mueller himself obviously is trying to justify, as you said, all the money that he's spending. And all of these independent counsels come up with something in the end. Of course, he's a special counsel. That's the derivation of independent counsel in the old days with Ken Starr. But this guy's different than Starr. This guy wants blood, in my opinion. Starr, wanted to play it safe. He wanted to be Supreme Court justice someday. So he just sent everything over to Congress with regard to Clinton and had y'all over there deal with it. He didn't want to deal with it himself. And Clinton, in my view, should have been indicted, and Hillary as well. The subsequent special independent counsel at the time, Robert Ray, said she had lied to a grand jury under oath, but he wasn't going to indict her because the District of Columbia, predominantly Democrat African-American jury would never convict her. Well, that's not the basis of our justice system, and African-Americans are a lot smarter than that, and so are Democrats. That was really, I think, semi-racist to even say that. So right now we're in a very grave situation. I want to add one other thing before we move on, is that we have a lawsuit that we filed against Hillary Clinton over Benghazi. And the theory of that lawsuit is that Hillary Clinton, by using an unsecured private email server, gave up the location of Ambassador Chris Stevens to the terrorists. In fact, Comey admitted that her server and her emails were hacked at least 5 times by adverse parties, by 5 different adverse parties. And therefore, we brought a wrongful death case for the parents of Sean Smith and Ty Woods, Patricia Smith and Charles Woods, who died at Benghazi with the ambassador. And it was against Hillary Clinton. And we also brought a case concerning the same case, defamation, because Hillary Clinton defamed Patricia Smith and Charles Woods when she told them that this attack was the result of a bunch of Muslims that got upset over a video of Muhammad that was critical, when, in fact, she was telling the president of Egypt and her daughter the opposite, that it was al-Qaeda. And when our clients revealed that during the last presidential campaign, she smeared them, saying that they were liars. And she wasn't Secretary of State at the time, Bob. She was a private citizen, so she doesn't have immunity for that at a minimum. Well, anyway, to make the long story short, and this tells you what we're dealing with today in our justice system and our judiciary, I want to get your comments on it, is that the judge that was assigned to the case, Amy Berman Jackson, the same judge that has the Manafort and Gates prosecutions, that's been so political and has put them under house arrest, they're still under house arrest, put a gag order on them that they couldn't even comment to the media to try to deflect from their being destroyed on CNN and MSNBC. This very politically compromised, and I would say corrupt, federal judge dismissed the case for Patricia Smith and Charles Woods on the eve of Memorial Day. Gold Star parents. It was basically to stick it to them during the campaign. I think maybe she thought she might get a higher appointment if Hillary Clinton was elected president. Maybe she would get on the D.C. Circuit or maybe someday even the Supreme Court. Well, I took an appeal of that. And this appeal is now in front of the D.C. Circuit, the appellate court, the federal appellate court in Washington, D.C. A very leftist panel was assigned. One of the judges, Patricia Millett, ultra-leftist, ultra-leftist, had made contributions to Hillary Clinton's 2008 presidential campaign. I asked her politely to recuse herself from the case. I then filed a motion to disqualify her. She denied it herself. It was under 28 U.S.C. 144. A judge has to take herself off the case if you file an affidavit. I want to get your take, Bob. Can a federal judge who gave money to Hillary Clinton to get her elected as president, granted before she was nominated by Barack Obama for the bench, should she get off the case? And this is what we're dealing with in the federal judiciary today. We just talked about what we're dealing with Special Counsel Mueller, what we're dealing with the Justice Department and the corruption at the FBI. This whole situation is out of control. There's no justice system left. And what do you think about Millett not getting off the case?
What you've described, and it's a very accurate description of that case, it clearly warrants action to be taken against that judge. Clearly, there is a conflict there, but often, as you know, in Washington these days, conflicts apply to one side, but not the other. The lack of ethical standards and the practice of ethics in Washington these days, Larry, is absolutely saddening. The case that you just described is, and the case involving Flynn, former Flynn, National Security Advisor Flynn, was forced out. And then entered a plea. I'm not quite sure why he entered a plea so quickly, but he entered a plea to lying to the investigators. And now we find out in sequestered testimony that FBI Director Comey did not even believe that he had lied. So, there's just is no ethical underpinning whatsoever to these actions, whether it is the special counsel, whether it is those operating at the behest of the special counsel, judges that essentially empower these things to go on without stopping them, without questioning them. And then you have federal judges directly engaging in what would at best be described as unethical behavior, if not unlawful.
Well, and here's the problem. When you file a complaint against judges it's called the Judicial Council of these various circuit courts, who reviews the complaint but the fellow judges in and around that courthouse. They all have lunch together, they go to parties together, and they circle the wagons and protect themselves. And there's no way that you can force them to get off cases or to be ethically disciplined for what they do. It's an untenable situation, Bob.
It is, and what it's doing, Larry, it's not only dramatically and adversely affecting the individuals who appear before these judges, against whom you're trying to seek justice, for example, but it imperils the entire judicial system in the United States because it significantly undercuts the ability or the confidence that the public needs to have in our judiciary. So people see what's going on with your case or with Mueller, and they may have a valid case to bring or be involved in one, and they may just say, well, this system is so corrupt, I'm not even going to try, or it's stacked against me, and I know I'm going to lose, so we'll just settle the case. It infects the entire judicial system in the country, Larry.
Well, and let's get back to the American Revolution, with the Declaration of Independence being signed and declared in my native city of Philadelphia, where I was born. I mean, what was one of the underlying bases of the revolution is that the justice system of King George III had become so corrupt that there was no choice but for the colonialists declare a new nation and, in fact, declare war on the crown, which is what we did. Now we seem to become full circle, 240 some years later, that we don't have a justice system either at the level of the Justice Department itself, its investigatory agency, the FBI, or the judges that sit on top of all of this. And that's what scares me, is that we're headed into, given the fact that the American people are getting more and more educated about the injustice. It doesn't matter what race, religion, color, or creed you are. You can see the injustice today. It doesn't matter what your political stripes are. You see it on both sides. I think we're headed into a combustible period where we could wind up with a potential of mass violence in the streets.
It's beyond distressing. It really does raise some very serious questions about our the system of governance that, as you mentioned, our founders put together a magnificent structure. We see it not only in the initial Constitution itself, but throughout the Bill of Rights. We see it discussed at length in the Federalist Papers, that magnificent set of essays that describe very clearly how this system is supposed to work, why it's supposed to work the way that it is, and yet it clearly is not working. And there are very, very few people like yourself, lawyers especially, who understand this, but who have the backbone to stand up to the establishment and say, this has to stop. We have to get back to the rule of law. You see very, very few people in the Congress who are sufficiently interested and motivated and have sufficient backbone to do this. And you see, very few federal judges that will even involve themselves in these cases. They, basically will look for a reason not to decide something, not to see that justice is done, rather than let's find a way to make sure that justice is done.
Well, and why is that, Bob? Because these judges, and I was once offered to possibly be a judge by Senator Connie Mack in Florida when I was trying to be U.S. attorney. They were going to give it to the roommate of Jeb Bush at the time. Daddy Bush was president. But I said, I don't want to be a judge. I'm an advocate, okay? But to be a judge, you basically have to scratch the backs of the establishment. And that's the problem, is that these are establishment people. They don't want to take risks. They don't want to make waves. But you know what? We need some real patriots out there that are willing to risk their lives, fortunes, and sacred honor like our founding fathers. And that's what, to me, I'll let other people judge me on whether I measure up to that. I know you do, Bob. But there are very few people out there who will get the job done and risk all for this country. And that's why I've said I will risk all for this country. And I want people to go to freedomwatchusa.org and sign my petition. I need 100,000 signatures to try to convince the president and deputy attorney general to make me special counsel. Anyway, we're going to be back, Bob. I want to talk to you about what happened down in Florida this week, my native state, because it's very important. We'll be right back.
Before he was a trial lawyer, he sliced him and diced him.
People used to ask me, Larry, what caused you to start Judicial Watch and now Freedom Watch, given the powerful forces in this country that put you at risk?
In a meat packing plant.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
A very special prosecutor, Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
I'm back with Bob Barr, former congressman from Georgia, former U.S. attorney for the Northern District of Georgia. We've been talking about the state of the nation today, the breakdown in our justice system, and that's putting it mildly. It just simply has become so corrupt, nothing ever happens when it comes to bringing politicians and others accountable under the rule of law. There's a dual justice system. But we had a tragedy down in Florida this week. We had a massacre in and around Coral Springs, Florida, who I know quite well. I ran for the Senate in Florida. I visited every place at least 3 or 4 times. And Coral Springs is a very nice place. And Bob is a member of the Florida Bar, so am I. And we take a special interest in Florida and the country. But, Bob, this is the kind of a situation is that this country is becoming very violent. There are crazy people out there. And we have these massacres that occur by young kids and otherwise, and they're not mentally sound. But the whole thing can really mushroom, and it can really get out of control. And I wanted to also get your view on what happened in Florida. And I know that you're on the board of directors of the NRA. You're not talking for them today. You're talking for yourself. But I don't think it's a question of guns. I don't think it's a question of restricting the right. It's the question of the people out there and the state of the nation today. But I want to get your take on it.
It's a fundamentally important problem, vital to the continued freedoms that we have in this country, Larry. And there's basically, I think, two important aspects to this. One is to recognize that we are facing a complex, multifaceted societal problem here that cannot be addressed with simple solutions like, gun control. We have to get to the root of why our society is producing these fundamentally evil people, particularly young people. Why is that? And to study that and come up with solutions based on that study, not simplistic solutions to a complex problem. Secondly, I think what we are finding out about the FBI is it, again, points out the incompetence of some of these federal agencies and individuals. I mean, you and I both respect very much the Bill of Rights. We don't want the FBI to go investigating or questioning somebody without a good reason for it, consistent with the Fourth Amendment, for example. But where you have information being given to the doorstep of the FBI saying this guy, somebody tweeting that they want to be a shooter at a school, given that and it's out on that person's Facebook with their name, and the FBI saying, we have no way to track it. That's nonsense. And then you have somebody else that goes to the FBI and says, I have personal knowledge that this guy is going to do something, and the FBI doesn't even pass the information on to the investigators to do something about it. That is frightening in and of itself.
Well, it is frightening, and we've had a complete breakdown in our society today. But it's not a question of guns. It's a question of the people. It's a question of people doing the investigation. And, of course, the Democrats had to jump on it immediately. The left had to jump on it immediately. We need gun control. You and I know, Bob, both, that dictatorships, the first thing they do is to confiscate guns from the American people. And I got to tell you something. In the Bundy case, and people know about that, Klayman, his sons, they didn't pick up a weapon. But people did come to Bunkerville armed because they saw that the Bundy family was having the crap beaten out of them, that their cattle was being killed, that their lives were being threatened. And the Second Amendment was meant to protect us from the tyranny of a federal government. They did nothing wrong, and ultimately that case ended favorably, although the government's trying to reverse that now too, but we won't get into that on this show. But this is super important, and it's why we need a special counsel like Larry Klayman. So go to freedomwatchusa.org, sign that petition. Even if I'm not appointed, we need to make the point that we need people in there like a Bob Barr, like a Larry Klayman, like others who are not going to play political games. We're not going to do patty cakes. We're here to save this country, and we're hanging by a thread right now. Really, we're hanging by a thread. When you don't have judges, when you don't have prosecutors, when you don't have Congress that's willing to stick its neck out other than just do dog and pony shows and go on TV on Fox News and get themselves reelected and raise money, this country's going down the drain. So, Bob, I want to thank you for coming on. You're a hero in my eyes. You're my friend. I cherish our friendship. And we'll be back next week with another edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. And let's pray for this country and pray for your loved ones. We need all the help we can get.